This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. We want to welcome the Glatstein family from Silver Spring who came here for Shabbos. We want to welcome Danielle and Yehonatan and their father Eli from Silver Spring. They're son-in-law of Rabbi Nasirov of Fresh Meadows, who used to be a neighbor of mine.
Yeah, I'm married to the second daughter. She's got 5 daughters and 1 son.
Very nice. Okay, so welcome everyone.
Rabbi Glatstein, my boys love listening to him.
Okay.
Torah anytime.
So I want to speak at a very interesting inyan. We've discussed part of this in the past, but Ein Beis HaMedrash Bli Chidosh. I want to share with you a very interesting hanhaga of one of the great all-time achronim, the Maharshal, Rav Shlomo Luria, one of the great all-time achronim. He had a very interesting custom. As we know, the first night of Chanukah, we make 3 brachos, lahadlik, shasanisim, and of course shachianu, and from there on we only make 2. But the Maharshal had a very interesting custom, and this custom is quoted in a number of sources. First in the Shari Tshuva. What's a Shari Tshuva? In any Mishnah Berurah, there are like 2 forgotten achronim that you have under the Shulchan Aruch. You have the Shari Tshuva and the Ber Hetev. In fact, they once asked the Chavetz Chaim, like everyone who publishes a sefer, they publish their sefer. Why did he put the Shari Tshuva and the Ber Hetev in the Mishnah Berurah? Like, what's it doing there? It's a the Chavetz Chaim is a parish on the Shulchan Aruch. It's not a parish on the Shari Tshuva Ber Hetev. So he said it's not. He doesn't want to take over. He wanted to leave covered for other achronim as well. Anyway, the Shari Tshuva brings down that the Maharshal. I actually this past summer had a schus to be at his kever, the Yam Shel Shloimeh. Actually, the Chassam Sofer writes that without the Maharshal, we would never have been able to learn Gemara, because the Gersais, the texts, had become so corrupt over the years that we couldn't make heads or tails over the Gemara. And the Maharshal sifted and it was menake or menafe the text of the Gemara. In fact, the Chassam Sofer says the only reason the Maharshal was able to plummet the depth of the sugya is because the Maharshal had clarified the precise text. Anyway, the Shari Tshuva says that the Rashal kana shel kesef, the Maharshal bought a silver menorah. Not sometimes, every year. Every year the Maharshal would buy a silver menorah. Uvalel sheni hischal hadlikah. He wouldn't light it the first night, he would only light it the second night. Why? This way, when you buy a new item, you're allowed to make a shachianu. So this way, the first night was shachianu was covered. The second night, why would you make a shachianu? So he would buy a new menorah, make a shachianu on the menorah. So he'd make lahadlik, shasanizm, shachianu. The halacha is when you buy a new item, you make the shachianu not when you use it, but when you buy it. He says, even though you make the bracha when you buy it, there's a concept that you like to arrange brachos when you have other brachos to make. So since anyway he'd be making lahadlik, and anyway he'd be making shasa, so he would arrange the shachianu together with the others. Says the Matei Moshe. Fine. So Shari Tshuva is quoting who? Shari Tshuva is quoting the Matei Moshe. Matei Moshe was the Talmud Muvak of the Maharshal. His name is Rav Moshe Mas, and he was the primary disciple of the Maharshal. So the Matei Moshe, I want to read to you what the Matei Moshe writes about his Rabbi. But we learned from the Matei Moshe really a beautiful language that he uses in describing the customs of his Rabbi, the Maharshal. And he says like this. We know the Gemara says, Gedoyla shimusha shel Torah yoser milimuda. Greater is the service of Torah more than learning. Even though the greatest mitzvah in the world, of all the mitzvahs in the world, Talmud Torah is the greatest mitzvah. Someone in Silver Spring sent me, he said, Rabbi, I listened to the Shiurim. Probably the main theme that you keep on speaking about that I got is that Talmud Torah is the most important mitzvah. So we like to say that. It's important to know. But there's something greater than Talmud Torah. There's a mitzvah greater than Talmud Torah, and that is Shimush Tamid Chachamim. And there's a question: what is Shimush Tamid Chachamim? It's actually Machlokes Rishonim. Some learn it's literal, and that's what we're going to see in the Matei Moshe. That literal is to help Tamid Chachamim, to bring them food, to bring them drink, to bring why? Because when you associate that with them outside of the learning, that also has a tremendous influence on a person. The Gemara says to do business with one, to marry one's daughters to them, and so on and so forth, to associate with Tamei Chachamim. The other pshat is literally to hang around Tamei Chachamim in terms of learning. some people like this. The shiur starts 9 o'clock, I'm there at 9 o'clock. The shiur's over 9:30, I'm out of here at 9:30. That's not when the main learning happens. The main learning happens in the time after the shiur. When somebody asks, what did you mean? But it says like this, what did you really mean? Oh, what did I really mean? That's when you hear the amkos or the biur and the pirush. In other words, sometimes during the learning itself, you just get the generalities. But the subtleties, I would say, the subtleties are the people who sort of follow the Rebbe afterwards. Then they get to hear, what was meant, what's the depth of it, what's the perish of it. So that's the Gemara. The Gemara says, Gedola Shimush Shatar Yas Limuda. And by the way, many Gedola Yisrael talk about the Shimush that they had for their Rabbeim. For example, who is that me? Sam Sofer. Sam Sofer writes all the time, Kishiyatzakti Mayim Al Yedei Moiri, Rav Nosson Adler. Sam Sofer says that when he was young, he did not move his hand away from the side of Rav Nosson Adler. He serviced him wherever he went. Look, Sam Sofer was oila, it's one of the all-time greats. Anyway, here also the Matei Moshe has a beautiful expression. He says, "Va'ani k'shahayisi shoyev mayim mimayone hayeshua." And I, when I was drawing water from the well springs of salvation. You hear Yehuda? So even more important than going to the shiur is when the shiur is over, you follow your Rebbe. What did the Rebbe mean? What could I get the Rebbe? Does the Rebbe want to drink? Right? That's the even greater than Talmud Torah. It says, Kishay. That's what I was getting at, Okay, good. Someone got the thing, I'm sitting here looking at these donuts, someone passed the donut, right? When I was drawing water, from the well springs of salvation. What a beautiful language. He says, from the source of living waters, Hanoivim Mayim Shel Shloimeh, that emanated the waters of Shloimeh, who are Moiri Hagoin. Ra'isi Shekanolai Shragos Ktana Shel Kazer. So he bought small flames of silver. Uvalel Sheni Hischel Lahadlik. He began to light it on the second day. Ubirach Lahadlik. He would make Lahadlik, Shasanisim, and Shachianu. Normally when you buy a new item, you make the Shachianu upon the purchase. And that's the psak of the Rosh and the Torah. Nevertheless, he would arrange it with other brachos. As we see, we often do such a thing. Because the Gemara says, when do you make a shachianu on the sukkah? When you build the sukkah. But we don't do that. We arrange it together with the kiddush. Why? Because there's a concept that we like to arrange shachianu together with the seder habrachos. Likewise, the Maharshal would buy a new menorah, and he would arrange it together with lahadlik and sha'as anisim. Marv Rabbi said, this is half of a fellow. What in the world was the Maharshal doing? He was making shachiyanu on a new menorah after lahadlik and after sha'as anisim. That would seem, number one, that would seem to be a hefsek. Imagine a guy, he buys a new suit, and in the middle of halakha, says, I bought a new suit, lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, sha'as anisim, and then he makes a shachiyanu on his new suit. What would we call that? A hefsek. I would assume he would have to make the brachas again of lahadlik and sha'as anisim. It's a hefsek. You don't make random Imagine a guy said, I have an asher yatzar to make. Lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, sha'as anisim la'viseinu, asher yatzar sa'adam l'chachma. It's a hefsek. What are you doing? Right? So then why would he buy a new menorah? I mean, the fact that he bought a new menorah is very nice. It's not relevant to the mitzvah of hadlakas ner menorah. There's no mitzvah to buy a new menorah on Chanukah. There's no mitzvah to use a new menorah. It's even a pella that Achronim ask. Some bring down you should have a nice menorah on Chanukah. Mishnah Berurah brings down you should try to have a nice menorah, which is a pella, because hider mitzvah is on the item of the mitzvah. The menorah is not even the item of the mitzvah. The menorah is the item that houses. Maybe you should have nice neiros and nice shemen, but the menorah is not the chefza shel mitzvah.
But what if you get menorahs the same day of lighting? Because they are
then
before the first day of Chanukah. So then, and you did not actually take your.
You can have in mind that the shachiyanu goes on that, but why? It sounds like he would dafka wait to make the shachiyanu on the second night. Why would he want to make a shachiyanu dafka on the second night? Right here, that's what he's doing. He's making. That's what the Shari Tshuva says, that he would buy the new menorah every year and he would make the shachiyanu on the second night.
He's not making two shachiyanus.
So he made one for the first night, right? And then another one the second night. Well, what's he doing? That's an odd practice.
Different than a hefsek on a sukkah. You do kiddush and then you say leisha b'sukkah.
Between the kiddush.
Yeah.
So the leishiv is going on the kiddush also because in order to drink the yayin, you need to make the leishev, so it's connected. But a random shachianu on a new... Imagine if you made a shachianu on a new car, which, by the way, you don't make. What bracha do you make on a new car? If you buy it, you make a teva metiv. Now, if you buy it, not if you lease it. Most people don't buy cars anymore, right? But if you buy a new car... Now, it depends if you trust your wife. If you trust your wife to drive the car, then 2 people are being nana from it, so you make a teva metiv. If you don't, then you just make a shachianu. Now, if you buy a new house, you don't. Because if you buy a new house, you're going into debt for 25 years. So it's not you don't make a teva metiv on a new house, only on a car. Taka, some people, they buy a car, they also go and then speak to your local therapist. And okay, so the Gemara says like this. So Shaz, what's pshat in the Maharshal? Yeah? Why would the Maharshal make a shachianu on the second night? So listen to this, we're going to say a Pri Magadim, and then we have... right, you're from a Sephardic descent? Good, so we're going to have a big debate now between the Ashkenazim and Sephardim. A beautiful Lashitase. Okay, it's unbelievable. Okay, the Gemara asks like this. The Gemara in Shabbos, Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. Actually, at our Chanukah Suda last night, we had with my wife's side of the family, the Lakewood side of the family. So the Bachram said over Torah from Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz on this Gemara. Okay, we'll keep it simple. Amar Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi, Amar Rav. Hamadlik ner Chanukah tzarich levarich. When you light the menorah, you have to make a bracha. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Haroya ner shel Chanukah tzarich levarich. One who sees the ner Chanukah has to make a bracha. So you have 2 statements. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rav Chia Bar Ashi, it says in the name of Rav, if you light, you make a bracha. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, if you see, you make a bracha. Amar Rav Yehuda, Yom Rishain, Haraya Mevarech Beis. On the first day, one who sees makes 2 brachas. Umadlik Mevarech Gimel, and one who lights makes 3 brachas. Mikan ve'elach, from here on, madlik mevarach shtayim. When you light, you make 2. V'rayim mevarach achaz, when you see, you make 1. Ooh. So on the first night, if you light, you make 3, and if you see, you make 2. And on the second night and on, if you light 2, and if you see, you light 1. So what's the missing bracha that you don't do after night 1? So Gemara says, "My mamayit, why are you mamayit?" So what do you think it is? Shachianu. Mamayit zman. Gemara says, really? V'nimat neis. Why don't we say Sha'asan? Why don't we not say Sha'asan Nisan? The miracle was done already. No, Kol Yomei Isa. Every day there's a new miracle. Okay. So it says in Pri Magadim. Wait a second. What in the world is the Gemara's Havmina? Oh, what bracha don't you say after night 1? Good morning, America. What do you think it is? What was the Shaila? What's the Havmina over here? Apparently, the Gemara has a Havamina that you could continue to make a Shachianu on night 2. So why would that be?
Separate miracle. Each night's a separate miracle.
Why would that be? Now, it almost sounds like you can make a Shachianu on night 2, but Lav Dafka night 3. But night 2, maybe, yeah. The Gemara has a Havamina to such a thing. Why? So there's an interesting kasha. I don't know if you ever heard. Did you ever hear the Beis Yosef's kasha? Beis Yosef has a kasha, right? That... what's the Beis Yosef's kasha? Why is Chanukah 8 days? It should be 7 days. Taka, I was thinking, there's so many answers. Actually, now we said there are 500 answers. So Taka, Chanukah should be the whole year. Right? Because we have 500 reasons to have an 8th day. So Chanukah could be the whole... But that means they're all wrong except for one, right? Okay, but B'das made, that's the Beis Yosef's kasha. Chanukah should be 7 days because the miracle was only 7 days. So Beis Yosef gives answers that what? Either they split it up into 8, so every night was a miracle, or even the first night when they poured it into the menorah, there was still oil left in the jug, or even the first night the oil didn't burn down. The Beis Yosef learns that the miracle of the first day was the miracle of the shemen, the miracle of the oil. But the Pri Chadash has a different answer to the Beis Yosef's kasha. What's the Pri Chadash's famous answer? The first day, very good, Arlev. The first day, the miracle was the military victory. So, right, Chanukah, they rested from the military victory. That was also miraculous. It was 13 Yidden. I once heard from Rabbi Solomon that the whole Jewish army was 13 people. Rashi and V'zos HaBracha on the pasuk Barech Hashem Cheloi. Upayal Yadav Terzeh says there are only 13 Chashmonam. So 13 people against the whole Greek army. So that was also a miracle. So the first day was a military victory. So he says this. So I saw quoted from the Sefer Chukei Ritzainecha and Mamish Go'inus. Ashkenazim say like this: Al Anisim, V'al Porkan, V'al Gvurais, V'al Tshuais. V'yala milchamois. Shasis azena. Sfardim do not say milchamois. Sfardim don't say milchamois. Ashkenazim, we like to milchama. The Sfardim, they're more peaceful. They don't say milchamois. Why? What's machlokes? The machlokes is pri chadash and the Beis Yosef. The Sfardim hold like the Beis Yosef. According to Beis Yosef, the miracle of Chanukah is only the miracle of the oil. Therefore, they don't say milchamais. Ashkenazim, we go like the Pri Chadash, who was an Ashkenazi, Reb Chizkiel di Silva. He holds that the first day of Chanukah is not for the oil, it's for the milchamais. So therefore, in our text, we say milchamais. That's the machlokes, whether we say milchamais, Ashkenazim, Sfardim, is l'shita seinu, whether you go like the Beis Yosef or you go like the Pri Chadash.
Not Rambam?
I guess not, right? Okay, so be it as it may, it would come out then, at least according to the Ashkenazim, what's the first day of Chanukah? The miracle of the military victory. What's the second day of Chanukah? A new miracle, the miracle of the oil. And that's maybe why the Gemara has a havamina that the second day of Chanukah you should make a shechianu. The Maharshal loved Chanukah so much that he was choishesh for the havamina of the Gemara. And therefore he wanted to make a shachianu on the second night of Chanukah, because second night is like almost a new Yom Tif. The first night is a military victory, and the second night is a miracle of the oil. So therefore the Maharshal, in deference to the Havamina of the Gemara, in deference to the Pri Chadash, the Maharshal was noyeg to buy a new menorah every year and make a shachianu. It's a random shachianu. It's not a random shachianu. Because the same way the second night of Rosh Hashanah, really we make a shachianu on what? On the Yom Tif. But just in case it's a Yom Arich that we take a new fruit, so too the Maharshal Shachianu on the second night of Chanukah was going on Chanukah. But just in case, we're not supposed to now. The thing here is it's more than just in case. Because it's only a Havamina of the Gemara. But the Maskana of the Gemara is you don't make Shachianu on the second night of Chanukah. But still, in deference to that Havamina, you would buy a new menorah. Have in mind that the Shachianu is going on the Yom Tif and the new menorah as well.
Why not make the bracha all the way at the end?
You mean after he's done? So I guess the pshat is that really he should have done it when he bought it. The only reason he's not doing it when he bought it is he wanted to be mesader it with the other brachas. Because there's a svara in general to be mesader shachianos with other brachas. So it could be that if you don't put it there, it's not considered being mesader it with the other brachas.
You're saying the order of the brachas.
In like Havdalah. Why are we smelling besamim during Havdalah? It's not. It's like your mesader brachas together, like brachas hashachar.
When are you supposed to do it? I mean,
When you buy it. Really, you're supposed to make the shachianu when you buy the.
no, but some connected.
Whenever you. What's a Shabbos? It's not really a chit. You make havdalah al hakois. Why do you don't make you don't have to do besamim al hakois? No, there's an inyan since you're making brachas be mesader everything al hakois. So here, there's a concept you're mesader brachas. For example, technically speaking, when you wake up in the morning, when you get dressed, you say Malbash Haruma. When you put on your shoes, you say Asher Shasuli Kol Tsarki, right? When you stretch out, you say Mater Asura. When you stand up, you say Zakavum. We don't do any of it. We're mesader it with the brachas hashachar. There's a concept in brachas. You mesader the brachas together. So bottom line is this a good, should we be noyeg this practice of buying a silver menorah every year? What? So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, or let's say you happen to be a bar mitzvah boy and you receive a gift, a menorah, on the second night of Chanukah. Should you incorporate it into the Seder HaBrachos? Like the Maharshal. Not saying you have to buy a menorah, but what if you happen to you receive a menorah on the second night of Chanukah? So Rav Shlomo Zalman writes, by the way, this pshat in the Maharshal, this pshat is the pshat of the Pri Megadim.
Why didn't he first night lead his old menorah and the second?
Because the first night he doesn't need an excuse to make a shachianu. You make a shachianu even without a new menorah because it's the first night of Yom Tif.
So he lead first night old menorah.
Old menorah, yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. The pshat that we said in the Maharshal is the pshat of the Pri Megadim. He says like this. He says, Maharshal kana menorah kesef, uvelel sheni hidlik ba, umevarich shalish brachas shachianu gamkein. V'hinei b'gemara memaid zman deloy toimar. Not you don't say b'chafei neis nitzachon v'chavav neis shemen. The Gemara says you don't make a shachianu. Why would you think you do? Because you would think the 25th is a military victory and the 26th is the miracle of the oil. Im kain yesh beis shachianus. Umikamakim anan kaimelon de'in mavar shachinu below beis. Rak Maharshal asa kain lechibuv mitzvah. The Maharshal loved mitzvahs, the Sidron, and he arranged it gimel brachos, 3 brachos aneros, below beis, the shachianu, akelim chadashim. However, the Pri Megadim says, "Mikamakam tzarch iyam im yesh lanu lasos kain." It's a tzarch iyam if we should do this. Delay mechsi kiyuhara. So it doesn't look like gaiva. This is it's like in a very saintly, pious practice. So it's not lafi madragasena. So the Pri Megadim sort of questions whether we should do such a thing. He says it could be gaiva for us. I, the Maharshal, v'shani adoinenu rashal. The Maharshal was different. Maharshal was different. And so halacha l'maisa, he says, Rav Shlomo Zalman writes, Mishakana ikibel b'matana menorah kesef chadasha v'loi bir shachianu b'shah she'igil yadai. Have in mind when you make a shachianu on the first night. So you say, maybe then I should wait till the second night. No, don't do that. On the bottom he says, Ve'inoigen k'may shehivi haber heitev, in the name of the Maharshal, to wait till the second night. We don't do this. In other words, this was the Maharshal's personal practice. By the way, I once saw in the Sefer Chasidus, they say that a skula for Parnasa is to learn the Havamina of the Gemara. Why? Because they say this whole world, is the Havamina. It's Hashem's thought. Hashem thought to create the world. Hu Amar Vayeh. So Hashem is mefarnes us on the Bechina of a Havamina. The whole existence is a Havamina. So they're into... Okay, I'll just end off with this. There's another lamdas here, but we'll save it for a different time. I want to share with you just one particular miracle that once happened to the Maharshal, that he writes in the beginning of his Sefer as a Hakdama, that he himself experienced the Chanukah miracle in his own study. In the Hakdama, the Yam Shel Shlomo, if you look at number 13, we'll preface this with the famous question of the Chidush Harim, that what's the big deal that we celebrate the oil that lasts for 8 nights? By tzaddikim, these miracles happened all the time, like Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. His daughter said, "Oy vay, I lit with vinegar." So he said, "Well, so what? What's the chiluk? Oil burning itself is a miracle. So whoever says oil should burn will say vinegar should burn." So if that's the case, we don't have a Yom Tov to commemorate Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa's vinegar burning. So why do we have a Yom Tov to commemorate the burning of oil? So he says, for tzaddikim taka, it's not a miracle. The fact that it burned for all of Klal Yisrael, that's a big miracle. Anyway, the Yam Shel Shlomo writes, Pam echad ba liyadi al yedei ner mitzvah v'Torah ar. Ke'ilu heruni min hashamayim v'nasan li harmuna v'ametz kayach memelachtis harakia u'pischulei sharei oira loimer asoik b'Torah doin v'asar v'heter v'hoira. The Maharshal is saying that what gave him encouragement to write his Sefer is basically, he alludes to the fact that his oil lasted long. Ke'ilu Hashem was telling him, attaboy, keep it up. We don't really have much more details, but the Svarim bring down, the Kavayasha brings down, he quotes the words of the Maharshal, and he says, well, let me tell you the true story. He says on the 4th line, number 14, by the way, the Chidah brings this down as well, V'shamati mipi moiri al pi Kabbalah, she'inyin hu kach, Kishahaya Rav Shlomo Luria Zechron Bracha Loimed. When he was learning V'chiber Asfarim Yam Shel Shlomo, Eira Loi, it happened, Shahaya Loi Rak Ner Katan. He had a little candle. The Doilek Lefanu that was burning before him. Vayizman Korev Likavos was about to go out. Vayadoilek Kama Shois, Yosim Mishosh V'arba Nero Shleimim, and 3 or 4 candles burnt more than many, many hours. And this is what their Talmidim testify about him. He says, "V'zeh heidu alav talmidoi v'nechtoi v'zeh l'shonim bala neis hikar b'neiroi v'nisai v'zeh eira la'agoyin el neis mamish k'neis shel shemen ha'kodesh shabetzloiches ha'kedusha shabebeis ha'mikdash zechusai yamai lanu ashrei loi v'ashrei yoyladatoi." So the Maharshal, one of the all-time great achronim, he himself experienced such a miracle. And we see he had a special chavivos for the Yom Tov of Chanukah, as he bought a silver menorah every year on night 2. And one of the explanations is there is such a svara that the second night begins sort of a new phase of Chanukah, and that's when we begin to experience the miracle of the oil. Okay, Rabbi say, we'll hold it over here.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.